Hello class, today we're going to be taking a look at lesson 8.7, problem solving and with equations with fractions. And I'm going to take away this video so you can concentrate on your notes, and then we'll touch base again at the very end. All right, so during today's lesson, make sure that you take notes along with me as we learn this concept. Your essential question says, how can you use the strategy solve a simpler problem to solve equations involving fractions? Now, it's going to be a little blurry, but you should be able to read it. We're going to just do the best that we can. You can change an equation involving a fraction to an equation involving only whole numbers. To do so, multiply both sides of the equation by the denominator of the fraction. Let's unlock the problem. On canoe trips, people sometimes carry their canoes between bodies of water. Maps for canoeing use a unit of length called a rod to show distances. Victoria and Mick carry their canoe 40 rods. The equation 40 equals 2/11 times d gives the distance d in yards that they carried the canoe. How many yards did they carry the canoe? Use the graphic organizer to help you solve the problem. Now class, before I get started on notes, if I'm ever going too fast, you can always pause the video and go back as much as you need. All right, so what do we need to find? Well, I need to find the distance in yards that Victoria and Mick carried the canoe. What information do I need to use? I need to use the equation 40 equals 2/11 times d. How will I use the information? Well, I can solve a simpler problem by changing the equation to an equation involving only whole numbers. Right now we have a fraction. We're going to want to change this to a whole number. Then I can solve the simpler equation. So let's take a look at how to do that. First, we write the simpler equation, 40 equals 2/11 times d. And the next thing that we can do is to multiply both sides by the denominator. The denominator is 11. So you multiply 40 by 11, and you're also going to multiply 2/11 times 11. 11 times 40 is 440. And 11 times 2/11 d is 2d. And just to make sure that you know how we got that, if we do 11 times 2/11 and multiply across, well, I know 11 can go into itself once. If I multiply across, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 divided by 1 is 2. And we have to remember to keep our variable next to the number. So 440 equals 2d. Now we've written a simpler equation. Now we need to solve the simpler equation. First we write it out, 440 equals 2d, and use the division property of equality to divide 2 on each side. So 2 divided by 2, we can cross those two out. 440 divided by 2 is 220. So Victoria and Mick carried their canoe 220 yards. Let's go to the next page. All right. Now on this page, I've actually already completed the notes for you, so you may need to pause to write them in, but let's go over the top part first. If an equation contains more than one fraction, you can change it to an equation involving only whole numbers by multiplying both sides of the equation by the product of the denominators of the fractions. And you'll see how this works down here when we get there, okay? Trevor is making 2/3 of a recipe for chicken noodle soup. He adds 1/2 cup of chopped celery. The equation 2/3 times c equals 1/2 can be used to find the number of cups c of chopped celery in the original recipe. How many cups of chopped celery does the original recipe call for? Use the graphic organizer to help you solve the problem. Okay, so what do I need to find? Make sure to write this in your notes. You can pause if it's too fast. The number of cups of chopped celery in the original recipe. What information do I need to use? 2/3 c equals 11, or equals 1/2, excuse me. So you need to use the equation. How can you use the information? You can solve a simpler problem by changing the equation to an equation involving only whole numbers. Then you can solve the simpler equation. Finish these notes, and once you're done, we'll go to solve the problem. Okay, so the first step is we need to write a simpler equation. Okay, first we need to write out the equation. So I'm going to put bullet points by each step. You have 2/3 c equals 1/2. Well, we need to make this into a simpler equation by, first of all, multiplying the denominators. Because there's a fraction on each side of the equal sign, in order to write a simpler equation, we're going to simplify by multiplying first the denominators of both fractions, which is 6. And then the second step is to multiply 6 on each side of these fractions. So you should have 6 times 2/3 c equals 1/2 times 6. All right, and I'm going to drop a 1 under these and multiply across. But I think I can simplify first. So I know 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 6 2 times, and if I multiply across, 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 divided by 1 is 4. So I have 4c. And then I know 2 is a factor of 6, so 2 goes into itself once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. This should be 3, and then 3 divided by 1 is 3. So you should have 4c equals 3. The next step is you're going to use the division property of equality and divide both sides by 4. We always want to get the variable by itself. So that's why we divide by 4 instead of 3, because there's this little c here. 4 divided by 4 is 1, but these can cancel out, so we're left over with c, and c should equal 3/4. So the original recipe calls for 3/4 cup of chopped celery. Just to review real quick, when you have an equation that has a fraction on either side, you're going to want to multiply the denominators together, and whatever that number is, you multiply those fractions by that number. Okay? All right. Describe another method that you could use to solve the problem. Well, you could also divide both sides of the equation by 2/3 to solve for c, and we're going to try that later. So for now, make sure you're caught up on your notes, and then click the other video for some practice on the share and show. All right, good luck.